do-it-yourself homemade self-defense walking stick, how to make and use it. I want you to learn how to make and use it. First thing I'm going to do is just show you how effective it can be. This is a simple 36-inch oak dowel rod that you can pick up at a do-it-yourself store or a like a Home Depot, a Lowe's. I pick mine up from Lowe's usually. Sometimes I go to Home Depot. You can get them from Ace Hardware here in the States. And then if you're overseas, most do-it-yourself shops will have it. But it's also, I put a link in the on the video. You'll see it'll pop up in the shop if you want to get one online. They're not very expensive. That's the beauty of this homemade self-defense walking stick. Carrying it in your hands, 36 inches, so it's the regular length. It's the same length as a traditional walking stick. This is also known as the hanbo in Japanese Okinawan martial arts. And you have three ways that you're going to employ it for self-defense. The first way, with your hand on the top, using it as a walking stick, you bend the knees and slide your hand down the back of it. So your hand comes here and down, and then you get it into this position so that the short side is facing the threat. Your other hand is up and open. You give a verbal command, back up, get away from me, don't come any closer. This is self-defense only. And then you have a simple thrusting motion, coming straight in by turning your shoulders and your hips, extending that arm. You can accelerate that strike by taking a little step. So your hand is here, it's up and open, bend the knees, and then it's a simple strike. The second thing you can do here is bending your elbow, putting your hand to your head, guarding your head. You can strike using this part into the bottom of his body, up between his legs or up under his chin, or maybe he's coming in with a punch or he's got a weapon, and you smash. After you do that, your front hand comes up, grabs hold, and then you can step and simply thrust into his nose, into his teeth, into his throat for self-defense. You ask yourself the question, what can I remove or destroy? That's self-defense principles coming from Tim Larkin's book, When Violence is the Answer. This is self-defense. This is not street fighting. This is not school fighting. This is not you're a bad person, you lose your temper, you're going looking for a fight. This is defending yourself with a homemade self-defense, do-it-yourself homemade walking stick. How to learn how to make it and how to use it. We're going over how to use it first because I want you to see how simple and effective it is. So your hand comes down the back, come up with the thrusting motion, answer your phone, step and thrust here. Your hand can slide. You see, I don't know if you saw all that sawdust come off. This is when I just started. So I put the first little bit of sandpaper on it. It's still really rough. Comes down the end, and then by sliding your hand down the back, you're pushing on the walking stick as you're turning through your shoulders and hips, accelerating that strike, and you're targeting his ability to be awake. Maybe you hit him in the head, knock him out, make him unconscious. Maybe his ability to see or his ability to breathe temporarily, permanently. But you're going to turn and strike here, all from this basic position here. This is one set of combination strikes that you can do with a homemade do-it-yourself walking stick. Bend the knees, thrusting, answer the phone. Again, that's a strike, catching the front hand, thrust here, slide your hand down, bring this forward here. And then the next set of techniques, we're going to go down the front. So your hand can either slide down the back to get it into that protected position, or it can slide down the front. Garen's here. Hello, Garen. It's good to see you. Harold asked, what's the name of the book for self-defense principles? It's by Tim Larkin. In the description of this video, you'll find that book and the link to it on Amazon. And you don't have to buy it from Amazon, but you can go look at it there and see what it's called, what it costs. It's very inexpensive, but it's When Violence is the Answer. And the basic principle of that self-defense book is using violence against violence. So he's trying to take from you your life, your dignity, your freedom. We're trying to hurt your family with violence. You're going to use violence to stop him. That's why this is not a fight. This isn't a competition. It's not sport. It's not karate. It's not boxing. It's violence to stop violence using the do-it-yourself homemade walking stick. This is how to learn how to make it and how to use it. So we started with coming down the back. This time you're going to go down the front. You point your thumb at the threat. That pops it into this front hand, and you can step and thrust, or you can step back as he's coming in and thrust. Either way, it's going to be effective. From here, bringing your back hand forward, just like you're punching. This will now strike the side of his jaw, or maybe into his temple, into his neck. What can you remove or destroy? His ability to be awake, his ability to hurt you and grab you, your turning here, and then I want you to slide this hand down the front again. This is something that comes from Hanbo training, Japanese Hanbo, which is the 36-inch walking stick, is where we're getting a lot of these techniques. Slide it here, and then bringing the hand forward. Now, the techniques are never as important as the principles. So remember, the first principle of self-defense is situational awareness. Pay attention to what's happening around you. Number two is getting into a better position. In this case, as you bend the knees, the hand comes up, you point the thumb at the threat. Now you put your walking stick between you and the threat. He's got to get through that to get to you. You can simply thrust it here, punch him here, strike here. Three simple combinations with your do-it-yourself homemade self-defense walking stick, which is really just this Lowe's oak. And you'll see I've already sanded most of this off using 80 grit. And we'll go over that just in a second. But they come with a dark green. It's a light green. It's usually poplar, which is a softwood. You don't want a softwood with the hard oak down. Oak or harder. So from this position, the hand's here. You're sliding down here. You point the thumb, thrust, punch, strike. That's just another simple set of strikes using your homemade walking stick. Do it yourself. Now, you could also carry it in this position. So you have three ways to get it into self-defense. The first way is sliding down the back. The second way is sliding your hand down the front. The third way is you might just simply be walking and carrying it like this. I see people carrying a long stick this way. It's very common down here because there's so many people who walk their dogs, especially smaller dogs. And when there are larger dogs that are poorly behaved or they're off the leash, maybe they've been let out and they're vicious, people have been attacked, and it's becoming more and more common as more and more people kind of fall through the bottom of the cracks financially because of what's happening in the world with high inflation and job loss and all that other stuff. And we don't have to go into all that, but you can understand that there are a lot of people who might kick the dog out of the house instead of continuing to feed it and take care of it, which is very expensive. And so these dogs now are roaming the streets. You're walking your dog, or maybe it's in the backyard of somebody's house, but it's a poorly trained dog, or it's just one of those breeds that can snap and go after people, go after your dog, go after you. And people carry the stick for that reason. I ask people when I see them walking with their stick, we've got several in my neighborhood, I'll ask them, why do you carry that? And every one of them says, for the animals that might attack me, and then the owner who might also not have good common sense, might be an angry, violent person too. But they carry it for self-defense. So, and we'll go over that. We have some really good questions in the chat. We'll go over some of those questions here in a second. I want to show you holding it here. You have two ways to get it into a self-defense position, either here or here. So simply turning your palm up. Now you have a split grip. There's a strike here, sliding your hand. You can bring it up here. You can thrust here. You can strike down on top of his head here, knock him out for self-defense, or turn it over here, strike with the long side, two-handed thrust this way, striking, pushing this straight into his teeth, boxing the sides of his ears, striking down on top, lifting it up between his legs. All simple strikes. Now, if it is that vicious dog who's coming after you, you want to stick it in his mouth if you can. Give him something to bite, and then it's like playing tug with the dog, like a playful dog. But this is a vicious dog that's trying to do that with the flesh on your leg and rip your leg apart or other parts of your body. If you can, get that, let him play tug. If not, you can strike the dog into the nose, coming down here, and because you're using this oak self-defense, do-it-yourself homemade self-defense stick, you'll have a lot more leverage, a lot more power than you would if you were trying to stop a dog who's tearing your dog up just by using your hands. Once that dog latches on and starts to shake the dog to kill it, you might not have any other choice. But if you have this stick, you might be able to use the stick. You might be able to get that, stick that between his mouth and your dog and pull it back this way, rip him off that way, which is effective. That's one technique that you would be able to do with a stick like this. We'll go over that in another video, how to use it specifically for a vicious animal that's trying to hurt you or your animal or someone in your family. Becoming much more common. So I showed you three ways to get into these. By no means, you can bring it across here, you can bring it up, you can strike down on top, you can block and strike. So a lot of ways to use it. We'll go over some more of those ways here in a minute. But I want to show you how to make it. And it's the most simple thing that you can make. Again, this is a 36-inch. This one is 1.25 inches in diameter, or 1.5 inches, I think. You can get it just a simple inch, but this one is 1.5 inches, which means it's heavier and it's thicker. For big hands like me, I prefer this one. You might prefer one that's a little bit smaller in diameter, that's 1 inch. It's going to be just about as effective. It just won't hit as hard because it's not as heavy. But once you oil it up, and we'll talk about that, then it is going to be effective for self-defense. Now, the question earlier was about a bigger person. How do you defend against somebody who has a powerful physique? And the simple, fastest answer to that is my eyeballs will pop out of my head with the same amount of force and pressure that someone half my size will have their eyeballs pop out. You can break and smash my nose into my face using the same amount of force against someone who's half my size. If you were to stick this for self-defense, life or death, and he's trying to take your life from you, and you were to jab that into his throat, he's 2 times bigger than you. His throat is going to collapse with the same amount of force, exact same as your throat. The cartilage that's in his throat is going to collapse. He's going to asphyxiate and pass from the attack, the self-defense, the consequence of his attacking you when you defend yourself with your stick. Hitting him in the solar plexus, you're going to knock his wind out and knock him to the ground, or hitting him between the belly button and the privates with that technique. He's going to fall to the ground under the same amount of force that you would if you were struck in the same spot. So it doesn't matter if he's bigger, stronger, faster. If you understand the principles of self-defense, using violence against violence, what target can you remove or destroy, and you're thinking about those vital spots, then that's why you can defend yourself against somebody who's a lot bigger. This is all for self-defense. Yeah, Michael says so. It doesn't matter, doesn't see the difference in people. You get either does Hickory, Darren says. Absolutely. All right. So for self-defense against somebody, using this, it's very effective. Solar plexus is good on a big guy. Michael says, amen. Yeah, and Garen says smaller diameter. If you choose to go with a 1 inch instead of a 1.5 or 1.25 inch stick, it's going to be, you're going to concentrate the force even smaller spot, making that hit even, it's like that thumb principle. When you just stick that thumb into somebody's solar plexus and you know how to, and you train your hand a little bit, and you can move them back and knock them back that way. All right, so I'm going to show you, I've already sanded this for about a minute before we started, just because I didn't want to get any splinters in my hand. And because I've done that, I picked up a rough one and tried to show you something and then got some splinters I had to take out later. If you use 80 grit, 80 or 100 grit to start with, the way they figure that out is they, per inch, square inch, they have 80 pieces of sand per every square inch. 80 or 100. 100 is just as good as 80 in my opinion. There's not much difference. That's going to pull off all of the rough stuff, most of the splinters and most of the rough stuff. And then it's going to be smooth. And these come pre-sanded, but not sanded well enough for you to use for a homemade do-it-yourself walking stick. So you want to get 80 grit, 100 grit, and sand that really well. And you just run it back and forth, get the tips. I like to hold the sandpaper here, get a little bit of a bevel there, a little bit of an edge, take the edge off so it's a little bit smoother. As I slide my hands, I might be striking this way and bringing it through and bringing the hands from one side to the other side. So I want my hand to be able to slide through it. So you kind of sand that off a little bit. Then I go to the either 120 or 220, and I'm at a 120 grit. Actually, I have one piece left, and I have it on my power sander. And I sometimes use the power sander for the smaller sticks, but I find sanding these by hand is very therapeutic. So I enjoy, and so I'll just kind of hug it in like that. And then the key to sanding are circles and light pressure. You don't want to squeeze really hard, and it's not going to make it any faster. It's actually going to make it slower, and it's not going to be as effective as if you make nice circles. I don't know if you can see the sand coming off of that. There we go. See a little bit of it. Yeah. And that same thing with the tip, and then again on the edge. when I do the whole staff, I'll just hold it like this. I'll either use these longer pieces or a little bit shorter. And then you kind of, again, it's very gentle. When you're making a do-it-yourself homemade self-defense walking stick, how to use and make one, you have to, let's see if we can get a big dust cloud there. And what I'm doing here is turning my hand and repositioning the hand. So you're going through and then you reposition and you turn it. So you're constantly doing a different side. And I do that for about a minute, 30 seconds to a minute. You go by feel. You'll feel that's already so much smoother using this 220 grit. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. And so you're spending and sanding, you'll invest maybe 5 minutes total, in my opinion. And I've been doing it for a long, long time. I'm making this for somebody who ordered it online. There's a link in the description if you want one of mine. I charge a little bit more because I put time into it. But 5 to 10 minutes, sanding it really well. Sometimes you'll get a rougher stick. You'll have to go about 10 minutes, a little bit longer into it. And then using butcher block oil. And there are a lot of different brands. Again, I put, if you hit the shopping button on the video, you'll see one of the options. But I'll take a rag and I'll soak it. And then you just rub it and you get it coated. And you don't want to burnish it in. You don't want to push it in just yet. You want to just soak it really well and then put it somewhere, lie it like this flat. You don't want to lie it up against the corner or straight up. I just make them flat. And sometimes I'll put mine in a big garbage bag. I use contractor bag and I'll soak it and I'll put it in there overnight. And then in the morning when I get to it, I'll turn it because some of that oil will have settled and then it'll sit down in it. And I'll do that for about 2 or 3 days. And then you take it out and then you take a rag, a dry rag, and you wipe the excess oil off so that it doesn't make it too slick. And you get it really dried off, but it also starts the heat from your hand and the rubbing, the friction will start to burnish the oil and give it like a nice coat so that there's a little bit of a finish on it. And then it'll last you forever with this oak. So we're making a do-it-yourself homemade self-defense walking stick. And if you want it, it's not my personality, but if you like to whittle and you like to carve with a knife, you can carve your initials into it. You can carve a pattern onto it. Maybe you carve a tiger or a dragon, whatever you want, whatever you like, your sports team. And you can add character to yours. I just like them plain. And the oak, especially oak, when you use the butcher block oil, it's going to make it darker, but it's also going to make it more flexible. When they sell these to you, they kiln dried them. So they put them in a low temperature for a long period of time, and they suck all of the moisture out of it so it doesn't rot and doesn't get eaten up by bugs. And then when you get it at the do-it-yourself store or the hardware store, it's extremely dry. So if you were to crack that against something heavy or something hard for self-defense, maybe against somebody's head for self-defense, then it's going to crack or break. If you oil it up for 2 or 3 days, then the oil will go back into the wood and the wood will come back to life and it will be heavier. So it means it's going to hit a lot harder and it's going to gain more flexibility. So it's going to bend before it snaps and breaks. So it's going to be less likely to break when you're defending yourself with it, or even if you're practicing with it. Now I want to go back to how to use it for self-defense. We started with it in the backhand. It can be backhand, front hand. You can be squared up. The key is every time for self-defense, you need to give a verbal command when you can. Get out of my face, back up. I will defend myself. You tell them to move back. You don't say please. You don't say it in a weak voice. You say, get out of my face. And you get your hand up. This hand is so important. If he throws a punch or he swings something at you or he's trying to slash, you can cover your head with this hand. And if you want to, you can stick the elbow into his face, smashing his teeth down his throat for self-defense. But you're bringing this hand here. The same time you're bending the knee and your hand is sliding down the back. Now, when you come up, the short side is here, and you can immediately strike here. You can punch and turn your hand over, which means that you're going to hit with the long side against the side of his head, or maybe into his shoulder or his arm, or his wrist, or maybe he's reaching with that knife and you can smash that. You can bring it back the other way, smashing here. You can bring it up between his legs, under his chin. He's reaching here. You can smash the hand. You can answer your phone, put your hand to your ear, get it in the front hand, step and thrust, slide the hand, smashing here, bring the back hand forward, cracking him aside, the side of his head, all from this position. So from here, bend the knees, practice this motion, come up, give a command, get out of my face, take a deep breath. What can you remove or destroy? That comes from Tim Larkin's book, Violence is the Answer. That book link is in the description if you want to go read about what that is. And it's the principle of violence against violence. You want to take away his ability to see, breathe temporarily, permanently, his ability to breathe and stand up, maybe his ability between here and here, striking here, his ability to stand, bring this up, crack him under his chin, step and smash it right through his nose and his teeth, bring this against the side of his head, turn off his operating system, knock him out. You don't have to worry about him coming after you again. Taking the back hand and sliding the whole way. Your hand is applying pressure as it slides. Coming across the side of his face, into his jaw, into his temple, into the neck. There's a simple process of nerves here. And you hit that process, and then it flushes the blood out of his brain. He falls to the ground. From this strike, coming down here, there are unlimited numbers of strikes you can do with your hand in this position. You can also slide your hand down the front. So your hand is now coming here and it comes out like a sword. And from this position, you can put the other hand on it. Now it's like, for those military guys, like that bayonet attack, right? Striking with the back of the rifle, striking with the front of the rifle, striking with the back of the rifle, rifle butt strike right to the middle of his face for self-defense. Very simple. Warner says, Boehner, Bronkhorst says, thank you, nice to see you again. Boehner's in South Africa. How is it in South Africa? I've heard different reports. Some say it's more dangerous than it was. Some say it's quieting down a little bit. It's getting more safe. Anyway, it's good to see you. I'm glad you're safe. And MZ says we live in a scary world. And I don't want you to be afraid. I agree. Here's my theory. When we look at the news, we have to remember two things. One, they're trying to scare the snot out of us. They're trying to control our behavior by terrifying us. Two, things are really happening because you don't have to talk to the news. You can talk. I talk to my law enforcement friends and they say, yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening right now that they're not even telling you about. You should be aware of, you should be paying attention to. And so what that makes me think of is if you were in your house or your home and the fire alarm went off, you wouldn't just sit down and resign yourself and say, oh, well, I'm going to burn to death. You'd get up and you'd get out of there. And so when we hear all these crazy stories and we see these crazy news stories, instead of being terrified and letting it stick us in our home, let it be an alarm bell and say, okay, I'm going to pick up a stick. I'm going to make a do-it-yourself self-defense stick. And I'm going to learn how to make it and how to use it. And then you have some options for self-defense. Sliding your hand down the front, point the thumb. Just like that, brings it into that front hand. There's a thrust. You can block this way. This is a simple motion. You can sidestep and crack him on the top of his head for self-defense. That motion here, point the thumb, thrust, lift, switch your feet, switch your hands, and strike here. And that's something you can practice every day. This comes from the Japanese Okinawan Hanbo. Actually it comes from the Jo. Here, but the Jo is just a little bit longer. It's 54 inches. From here, point the thumb. You might make one out of 48 inches, cut the difference, and make yourself a stick that's about this long. But you bend your knees, point the thumb, thrust, block, or intercept his punch. You can intercept the punch as you step off the angle. So he's coming in here if you can. If you can't, don't do that. If you're not as mobile and that's going to make you trip, don't do the fancy dancy feet, right? Don't pretend like you're some Aikido master and start floating around like some dancy fancy guy and do all kinds of fancy footwork. Keep it simple. What works is what's best. From here, and there's a strike. Block again, switch your feet. Block it. You can just practice this. It's lift, step, switch hands, lift, step, switch hands. And all you're doing here is allowing one hand to slide by the next one. Now, these are just a few of the ways that you can use this do-it-yourself homemade self-defense walking stick, learn how to make, and use it. And I'm going to do a lot more of these. I sell these so fast that I often don't have one to show you with, but I'm going to make one to keep here in the Garage Dojo. And so we'll make a lot more of these because this is one of my favorite self-defense tools. It's the perfect length, the simple walking stick. You can carry it most places you go, and they're not going to question it. And you can either carry it like this, or you can carry it like this. If you add a little bit of design to it, maybe you carve it or you put a marker on it, and then you put a nice deep stain on it and make it not look like a stick you want to hit somebody with, but a true walking stick. Maybe you put you can get a tip for it, one of those brass tips. You can get a ball for the top, or you can just get a walking stick, right? And you can use this to practice these techniques, striking with, and then you'll know how to use your walking stick for self-defense. But whether you use this, you take it out of the house with you, or you leave it in the house to train with, this is how to make, this is do-it-yourself video, how to make and use the homemade do-it-yourself walking stick. Anyway, you guys have been awesome. Sorry if I couldn't get all of the questions answered. We had like a short window today, but I wanted to get this in, wanted to get this one out. This one's already been ordered. If you want one of mine, one that I made, the link is in the description below. If not, save your money, go make yours for less than 20 bucks. Probably less than $15, really. And it's fun, gives you something to do. You guys have been awesome, and I'll see you in a little